there's a lot that you and I have to cover on a potential SpaceX IPO, which we've reported is for the entirety of the business, right? Not just Starlink. But actually, important to start with, you would note that SpaceX is the private company that users of your platform are most interested in. In quantifying that for us, just transparently explain what EquityZen's relationship to SpaceX's private market shares is.
Sure, and thanks for having me, Ed. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. SpaceX is the most popularly requested private company on EquityZen. It's been that way for probably our entire existence as a business over the last 13 years. And that really just means that there is retail exuberance about investing in SpaceX. You know, the company is 23 years old. It's older than a lot of my employees. It has garnered interest. It's had success. It's out in the public. People have done incredibly well with Tesla as public market investors. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm to invest in the company while it's private, and what seems to be now an opportunity to invest in it while it's public in maybe even less than a year, which is pretty surprising.
There is, of course, a lot that we don't know. What percentage of the company is SpaceX going to offer? What is the structure of the IPO going to be? But in reporting this story, Phil, one of the things I reflect on is that existing SpaceX shareholders aren't that diverse. You have Founders Fund, Fidelity, Google through Google Ventures and through Corp Dev, 137 Ventures, and then like others in the world of venture capital and strategics. But my point is that quite a lot of the company is owned by quite a small group, and then there's the Elon Musk factor as well. How does that translate in an IPO environment for anyone that wanted to get into the company?
Well, there's a couple other things to think about, which is that a 23-year-old company has had a lot of employees come, stay, leave, right? And so you have a wide swath of shareholders, kind of like a long tail of ownership. And so sure, there's some concentration in some of their biggest investors and in the founders' shares. But so this thing is pretty widely held. I'd go so far as to say that an IPO might also be a solve for the fact that the company is a private entity and can only have 2,000 shareholders. That is a requirement before they have to start filing financials. That may actually be a bit of a driver here as well. But as far as what the IPO is going to look like, this is uncharted waters, right? Saudi Aramco, Alibaba, those would actually be smaller than these IPOs, right? And we don't know, or than this IPO, and we don't know if it's going to be primarily secondary liquidity to existing, if it's going to be new capital, though I would posit it's probably going to be new capital based on a lot of your reporting as well, because there's going to be need to be investment from SpaceX into new computing and processing power.
So to a big portion of the Bloomberg Tech audience that work in the world of technology, tenders and the secondary market is something they'll be familiar with. Loads of people will not be familiar with that. And so what usually happens with a big IPO is in late stage growth primary rounds, where the company raises money, issues new equity, you get these kind of anchor investors that come in ahead of an IPO. It might be a year in advance. In this case, what we're reporting is the tender is confirmed. $800 billion valuation, $421 share price. Could you explain that dynamic? Ahead of a big IPO, how there isn't any new primary round, not raising new money, which, as you know, Elon Musk has been at pains to point out on X.
Sure. In its simplest form, if you're a business that's profitable and you don't need new capital to continue growing, why dilute yourself by taking in new investment injection, through a primary? A secondary liquidity offering is a way to reward employees or perhaps early investors by getting them liquidity for their shares without diluting ownership overall for everybody else. And this is something that SpaceX has elected to do over the past few years, I believe kind of semi-annually, in a way to provide liquidity, not dilute themselves, also set a new kind of external price for their shares, but still maintaining an immense amount of control. And the only thing I would call out here, Ed, is that obviously $2 billion of liquidity is a big number, but it's actually only 0.25% of the valuation of this company. And so I hesitate to kind of identify that $800 billion is the new market price for SpaceX, more so that it is the market price that SpaceX has decided is out there.
Yes. Yeah, the tender was capped at $2 billion. That's what I reported. We just have 30 seconds. Valuation at IPO, $1.5 trillion. What do you make of that?
That, I think, would put it in uncharted waters, right? You've got 3 public companies that are worth north of $3 trillion. Where is the upside from 1.5? I'm not sure. At the same time, the bull in me says Palantir had a robust retail investor audience. It trades at north of 100 times revenue. So the art of the possible is somewhere in between those numbers. I do know that this would probably be literally the most exciting IPO we've ever seen.